Disney just released the final episode for the first season of the Acolyte, and even though I think it could have been much worse in the way they were doing things, I don't think it's going to be enough to move the needle as far as bringing back some of the Star Wars fans who have since kind of dropped off of the show and have abandoned Disney Star Wars altogether. In the final episode, they tried to throw in a couple cameo appearances. There was a cameo appearance from Yoda, which I think kind of raises questions because, yes, everyone would know that Yoda was around during the events of the Acolyte because he's very old. But at the same time, I don't think you really want to draw attention to the fact that Yoda was around during this time frame and he didn't sense any of this stuff was going on, because you would think someone as powerful in the Force as Yoda would have sensed if there was Sith actively killing Jedi, but apparently not, which raises more issues. Like, it wasn't bad enough that they had Keanu Mundi in the show because he's the one who specifically said the Sith hadn't been seen in a millennium in Phantom Menace, and then he was actually in this show, and even if he never actually personally witnessed the Sith, it still just kind of muddies the water on what he did and didn't know, and almost implies that the Jedi knew the Sith were around and they just decided to cover it up for, I don't know, whatever reasons, which a lot of people who are really fans of Star Wars kind of take issue with that fact. And then the second cameo that they had in here was a cameo from Darth Plagueis, which, yes, he could have been around at this time, possibly. It's not sure whether he was born at this time frame or not, but it seems like they're just trying to bait something else, because this is basically just something Leslye Headland personally wanted to do, so that's why Darth Plagueis was included. Plagueis was always in the finale in every version. Creator Leslye Headland told IndieWire on an upcoming episode of the Filmmaker Toolkit podcast, Darth Plagueis the Wise is a Sith Lord, referenced most notably in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and that's when Palpatine is telling Anakin about Darth Plagueis and how he can manipulate the Force and all that other stuff, and Plagueis was also Palpatine's master. And this is where I was thinking they could have actually gone much worse with this, because I was telling my wife before the final episode, like, I wouldn't put it past Disney to, at the end of the Acolyte, Chimera takes on either Osha or May as his apprentice, and he declares her Darth Plagueis or Darth Tanaris or something like that, just to try to change up the Star Wars lore in that way to make it seem like, oh, well, now it looks like those Sith Lords from Legends are actually a female and this is their origin or something like that. Like, I'm glad they didn't go down that route, and that's why I'm thinking it could have been much worse, but still, what they did, I don't think was very good, but you know, you take what you can get, I suppose. But when I was saying how I don't think this is going to be enough to move the needle, this is what I'm talking about, because we got the viewer scores for the individual episodes of the Acolyte, and you could see it started off kind of mid 5.3, 5.1, then 3.6 is episode 3, and that's where it kind of dropped off, and that's where they were at their peak. And then since then, it's kind of gone down. It picked up a little bit with episode 5. That's a 6.5, which is the top rated one on IMDb for the whole season. The final episode, 5.2. So it really just didn't recover from there. But also to take note is the number of people who are actually rating this. You got 23,000 for the first episode, 20,000, 23,000 for the third episode. And then it's just been going down since then. 15,000, 14,000, 9.1K, 8.2K. 4.8K for the last episode. Now, granted, it's still fresh, so there'll probably be more people who've come on to rate that, but it seems like the ratings for this show has steadily declining, even though on Rotten Tomatoes, it looks like they actually returned the audience score after they were getting pushed back. That's at 15%, so that's up from the 14%, which we saw pretty much steadily for the rest of the season. So it looks like this is what it is, and people aren't coming back to Disney Star Wars, or at least they're not coming back to Acolyte. And even now, some people who are normally allies of Disney and the media are starting to call them out and actually acknowledging that there is a problem with it. This article from Screen Rant, third-party viewership data reveals Disney's Star Wars shows have been losing viewers for years. It says here in the article, Luminant Data has published an excellent deep dive into viewership stats comparing the Acolyte with other Star Wars TV shows. Although the focus is on the Acolyte, the most important chart goes a step further and hints at something bigger. And this is a chart that they're talking about. And people will point out that they don't necessarily know Disney Star Wars data or the viewership data because this is a third-party site. And yes, that's 100% correct. But what we do know is they have a consistent method in which they actually measure viewership data for each of the Star Wars shows. And even though the figures themselves might not necessarily be the most accurate, it does show that the Acolyte is still trailing compared to other Disney Star Wars shows. And there's a lot of reasons for why people think that is, but one of the ideas that this article proposes is that it's because people are viewing Star Wars as a brand and not necessarily as the individual shows. And I think there is a lot of truth to that. We're seeing that with a lot of Disney properties like Star Wars, Marvel, where it's treated as a brand. And that's a double-edged sword for these studios because if people view it as a brand as a whole, well, then it can help prop up some of their weaker shows. Like if it's a Star Wars show with a more unknown character or a brand new creation, well, then people would be more inclined to give it a chance because it's still a part of Star Wars and it's building off of something that they're trying to do with their whole Star Wars thing. So that's fine. But if people are looking at it as a damaged brand, well, then it can pull back some of their more popular shows. And that's why studios should be cautious about that. As Star Wars, it seems like everything's been flailing lately. We've seen that with the MCU where even some of their more popular stuff is not necessarily doing as well as it used to because people are just kind of tired with that. And then Marvel has been trying to almost deviate from that and come out and saying like, oh, these things are kind of their own standalone property. So they don't want people to necessarily look at it as a brand. They want it to be its own thing, which I think, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. So you have to pick and choose when to actually try to utilize that. But the audience isn't necessarily going to discern that. I mean, it's not just a sports car or anything like that. It's a huge ocean liner that it's really hard to maneuver. So you have to be delicate on how they're going to be doing things. But this points out how there are exceptions. The Mandalorian, for instance, has been kind of an exception and all that because it was initially viewed as something separate and started off as being something separate from the rest of Disney Star Wars. It was kind of very much its own story, but as time gone on, it's basically just been like the vehicle to launch other Disney Star Wars shows, especially season 2. That's really all it was set up for other shows. And season 3 was definitely the weakest one as far as audience score and viewership goes. Oh, I don't know. Even The Mandalorian might be getting lumped into that whole just Disney Star Wars brand. And their upcoming movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, is definitely something that they need to succeed in order to potentially save Disney Star Wars. But I'm really just not so sure about it because I think people are just tired of it at this point, and they have lost a lot of fans over the years, especially when you get the current Disney Star Wars fans out there being as hateful as they are, trying to attack the people who are fans of the George Lucas Star Wars and not wanting to watch it. And then you get these pretty vile people on the side of Disney Star Wars right now, just basically gloating over the fact that like, oh, we're glad that people hate this and we're glad that it triggers people or that it upsets people. And it's like, okay, if that's the people you want to have representing your brand, then so be it. I mean, we still have the old Star Wars we can still watch. As I can ignore anything Disney Star Wars related and I can be fine with that. So if that's what they want to do, if this is the audience that they're trying to cultivate, then I guess that's okay. You're free to do that. If you like the Disney Star Wars stuff, if you like the Acolyte, then that's fine. I'm happy that you like it, but I can just watch my other stuff and be completely satisfied with that. I don't need anything new out there. And I think a lot of people are just kind of feeling the same way as me. And if Disney wants to kind of lean into that, then they have to understand that they have to severely reduce the budgets of their shows because what they're doing now just isn't sustainable for them in the long term. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Did you like the Acolyte, or are you just done with Disney Star Wars at this point? And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share the video because it helps out with the channel. Thank you.